to do world content with or nobody to run stuff with. Always pushing people towards things like the circles that people have in game for like world content, pushing them towards guild recruitment, forums and things like that. It's a bit difficult, and this is purely on a personal level. It can be quite difficult to try and push people towards obviously particular guilds, because then you can be seen as favoritism. So it is always a case of we want to push people to guild recruitment forums and say, hey, there's a bunch of different guilds there. We're not pushing you towards a particular one. Find one which works for you, etc. All that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely something we should and we want to do more of.
So perhaps something in game like searching for guilds, or
I don't know if there's any in-game stuff planned, because that obviously, if there's going to be more design element, then that needs to factor dev in. It's definitely something, it's an idea where I can always put across. I don't know if there are any plans, or there may already be plans in play that I'm not aware of, but it's definitely something I'll check out and I'll pass on from this.
Alright, cool.
Two things that might feed into that, and again, that take some organisation, but fit nicely into this segment. Both Vanguard and EverQuest at various points in time have run very, very good sort of new player systems. One where you can come in, there's a bunch of players who, in a semi-official capacity, are tasked with, helping and mentoring. And there were various game mechanics put into place to support that and make it worthwhile across the board. Certainly in the fact we've now got a core of people that are going, hey, this is our game, we're not changing. Incentivizing those people to help out with mentoring and introducing new players and doing so in a semi-formal way possibly could be quite a nice idea.
It's a great idea. It's certainly something I can pass on. It's always tricky when dev time comes into it, just because, as you all know, the focus is definitely on getting content for the next drop, and then the next drop will be the next quarter, but it's definitely something I can always push. I know it's something, there's definitely a big focus on trying to make that accessibility and more for newer players, and that will involve things like mentors and getting players to help them and stuff like that.
I mean, there are some hopefully relatively easy wins. I mean, for example, coming up with people that are official mentors, giving them access in a controlled way, say, to the odd item they could hand out to someone as a result of going through mentoring, or titles, things that wouldn't make any wholesale shift in mechanics required, but would really give them the tools to actually do that job in an efficient way.
I have mixed feelings on things like that, just because the previous game that I worked on, we had player moderators who were kind of the same thing. They did have slight moderation powers, which does make a big difference. And I've seen both good and bad come from it, so I'm always a little bit uncertain. I think that when you start giving an actual, like, whether it's a title or a reward or something like that, it is open to abuse. What I'd like to see is more of a kind of, a much more kind of like rewarding the mentor with something like physical, or something that isn't necessarily in game that can kind of be abused in a way, or at least kind of like give people the wrong motivation for wanting to help, if that makes sense. I think that there's definitely merit in the concept. It's just figuring out the details.
I think something that needs mentioning with mentoring is, over the past couple of weeks, obviously I've got my girlfriend into playing WildStar with me. I've been mentoring her a lot, and as I've not been doing dailies, most of the content I've been doing has actually been through mentoring, and the experience points or the elder points that I've been getting from that have been next to none, so there's no real incentive for me to actually go and mentor somebody, whether it be an unknown person or anything like that.
I actually think the reason for this was it was nerfed because you could create mentor chains. In beta, you could mentor someone who was mentoring someone else and chain like that and level to 50 very quickly. So I believe the actual EXP numbers you got from mentoring was nerfed before live hit, because they wanted basically stop people daisy chaining mentoring, and they removed the functionality for you to mentor people who were being mentored, if that was ever a function. But I think that's really cool. Like, this whole idea of recruit a friend as well, like a kind of system like that really needs to be introduced, just because people are playing the game now, but if I could go out and give keys to my friends and they could try the game, kind of like Eve has a trial system where you can get a trial from a player who's currently subscribed, and that trial lasts 30 days as opposed to a trial that lasts 7. And so you can go and you can talk to your friends. They get 2 30-day trial keys so they can give out to their friends which give them 30 days to try the game, and then maybe even buy a Plex, or buy a Plex with in-game gold, because I know that's like kind of a cool thing that Eve does with their challenge to make enough money to buy a Plex, and so something that could be available to do in WildStar as well.
Yeah, I know that we're definitely looking at things like Recruit a Friend and all that kind of programs and things like that. In terms of the mentoring stuff, I know that the original design is you actually get quite a big renown boost for mentoring, but obviously at the minute there's not really enough rewards that you can buy with renown to justify it. So I think that maybe that's something that can be looked into as well, and something that I can put to Dev and say, well, look, how about
Could
we
buy
kind of
elder
add
points with the renown that make me
something
happy.
like that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that ratio or conversion would need to be. Maybe it's quite not great,
Lots.
but at least it's something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all wish it would be lots, but yeah, it's definitely something I can put forward to. And things like Recruit a Friend and stuff like that is definitely being looked into from more of the publishing, marketing,
I definitely
brandy
think
side.
that with the upcoming drop 3, that Recruit a Friend should, well, yeah, obviously you get a reward from recruiting the friend, so instead of you actually sending out emails saying, oh, come check out drop 3, like, obviously if it's coming from a friend, then
It's more likely for people
more
to actually
incentive.
check it out. Yeah.
But definitely, I think quite a lot of people have put quite a lot of eggs in this basket, thinking that, drop 3 is sort of, if drop 3 is good, they'll come back. If not, then they'll write off WildStar possibly, but...
All right, folks, with that, we're going to draw the community discussion to a close. We're moving on to the discussion of events, be that player run, in-game events, etc. Who's going to kick off?
I'll jump right into this, kind of piggybacking on the idea that I said earlier. WildStar has a great public event system, and it's almost like it flew under the radar, because there's public events that were never done just because you didn't get enough people meant to do the public event. It was like ramping up, and so people got annoyed and moved on to additional questing, and so. But when you actually did the public events, they were very entertaining. Like the Ravenous Undead one just outside of Thade. I actually had a chance to do it once myself. I was like level 40 something, and I had gone back to the zone because we'd thought that like in beta you could kill the world bosses before you got to the attunement step and you get credit for it. And so we were trying to go around hunting these world bosses before we got to max level. Obviously it didn't count, but we did the Ravenous Dead public event, and it was actually quite fun. Like you get to waves and you get to like protect, and it was a very fun experience. And I think that a lot of players just haven't really experienced them, and with such a kind of robust, I wouldn't say robust, but with a system in the game, I think it could be used a lot more. And I don't know how flexible it is, but it could definitely use some UI improvements and some contribution improvements. But I think a lot of that has been touched on with the public event in Blighthaven, with a lot of the stuff that was fixed with that, a lot of the exploits that were done with that might have been sweeping changes across all public events. I'm not 100% certain, but I think this can really be used a lot more than it is. Maybe even open it up for players to create their own public events with different criteria, with checks and balances, so you don't have the same thing that happened in Skyrim Online. No, Elder Scrolls Online is the game called.
I think something like Timeless Isle in World of Warcraft, which obviously it's only got these big creatures that you need to kill, but something like that has all these different events going on simultaneously that people can obviously hop in there and play in a much more sort of volatile sort of questing environment or event environment, rather than sort of having to go to these 3 or 4 events that are currently happening across a continent.
Yeah, and so I think these events, people keep saying in modern MMOs, I want emergent gameplay, I want emergent gameplay. And everyone gets like, they love that idea of emergent gameplay, and public events, at the end of the day, are emergent gameplay. I mean, they're going to change every single time you have new players going in. I mean, the stuff you're doing is going to be the same, but the way you do it is always going to be different if you have new players. And like chat is saying, make them more rewarding. When I do a public event, I don't want to get like greens. I want to get like actually rewarding stuff. And with the system of scaling in the game, make it rewarding for level 50s to go back and do these public events.
Yeah, to shift the topic a little bit to the player-run events, it's been pretty sparse lately, of course, with the empty servers. But maybe we could try to do something fun when the merge happens, like to celebrate it.
I think
Yeah.
that's definitely something that I would like. Sort of, I know it's sort of going into a little bit PvP side, but something that could help organize maybe raids on other capital cities. Just putting that out there. I think something like that, which gets a good amount of the server online and participating together in one big community would, be really fun.
So on the talk of player events and things, one thing I just wanted to mention is, especially for us in the EU team, we don't necessarily always have the access to do things like, it's very difficult for GMs to do things like, the crazy events where we become monsters and raid bosses and stuff that we used to do at the end of beta. Those are very exceptional circumstances. That said, if players do run events, just let us know, let the community team know. We're more than happy to promote that stuff. We'll slap it all over Facebook and Twitter and the forums and Tumblr and wherever we can, because that's the stuff we want to encourage. But it's one of those things where it's very difficult for us to organize it, just because we don't necessarily have those amazing houses that have been created. We don't have the necessarily always have the resources all the time, but we're more than happy to support them and come along and do all that stuff. I know one thing which I've been kind of talking about today on Twitter and on the forums is I'd love, the fact that we sadly won't have any holiday events for Halloween, but I'd love to see a player organize like trick or treat tour going around different houses and players giving out like items to each other for good costumes. I'd love that kind
That
of stuff.
sounds
And it's
really
the kind
cool,
of,
actually.
it's the yeah, exactly. Everyone like does their house up to be a bit spooky, too spooky or whatever, and people have got all like costumes on and they're visiting their houses, and the owner of the house like gives out stuff, and then they join in and they go to the next house. And that's the kind of thing where if somebody organizes that, I will put it all over the place. I'll get as many devs or as many community team members to come as I can. That's the stuff I'd love to promote. But it's one of those things where if we know about it, we will promote it. But it needs to happen from the player point of view, if you know what I mean.
I think one thing for me as like we run a podcast over at WildStar Radio, like our interaction with community management, it's been really atypical with other MMOs. Like usually like you send it in to someone in the community, get an email like a week later, and then like the response is very slow. But I mean, WildStar community response from the community management team, it's been like excellent. Like we get a reply, within the same day or a day later and stuff like that. And I think for players, like not necessarily members of fan sites, management of fan sites or content creators, just regular players, don't usually have that interaction with the community team. I mean, the interaction they get with the community team is very one way. Like they go and see what the community team has posted on Twitter, but it's not like they're emailing you, asking you to do this kind of stuff. So I think it would really help if you came out on Twitter and you said, "Yo, players, we really want to help you guys host your stuff. Like send it send it to us. Like." We are here, we have all the resources behind Carbine as much as we can muster to help you guys out, because right now it's like we have to kind of find that out for ourselves, like emailing to you guys and the guys like, oh my god, you guys are willing to give us all this stuff, we didn't even think about that, right?
Jumping on top of that, it could be like really, really helpful to have some sort of, I know this is probably beyond your capability, but something in-game, like a community bulletin board or something that you can access in the main city that sort of, it'd probably just be a web portal or something that maybe the community managers can update to show you what's happening sort of that week in the community. Instead of people having to go on the forums or find out through word of mouth, it's like in-game.
An in-game thing, I mean, obviously, again, it all comes down to requiring dev time. I'd love something like that. I know one thing we've been talking about is trying to get a community portal on the website. That's definitely something which we are constantly asking and begging and kicking and screaming for. And that would hopefully, that could be a bit of a leeway between in-game and the forums, because I know not everybody goes to the forums. More people are in-game. Hopefully the actual website is kind of almost in between. In-game stuff's always difficult because it requires dev time to make stuff. But yeah, in terms of things like putting things out there, I mean, what I find, just because my hours, I work in EU, I work EU hours, so I'm in the office 9 till 5. which is funnily enough when most of the other people in my community are at work. So a lot of my times, a lot of my stuff will get missed. But that said, I'm more than happy to definitely start trying to get more out there of send stuff to us, making more, forum posts and for Facebook and Twitter and all of our social channels we have access, and saying, look, send stuff to us. You can send stuff to us. We'll promote it. If you're doing an event, if you've got a cool competition that you're running in game, let us know. Or if you've got, things like the fan art, send it to us. We've got such a great, wonderful, artistic community. One of the things I always, this is something I always make a big deal of if we ever have any, executives visiting, or if we're asked to do a lot of reports on the state of the community or who are the WildStar players, I always make such a big deal that we have such a creative community. We have people making amazing artwork and sculptures and things like that, and we're starting to see a few more people starting to do things like costumes, and there was some great machinima made, and I really want to encourage more and more of that. And it's just one of those things of just send it to us, and we'll be more than happy to promote it and things. And just for anybody listening, if you do have stuff like that, you can either just contact us on Twitter or on the forums or on Facebook, but you can also email it to the red phone at Carbine Studios. That's a community email address that people can use if they've got something cool they want to share, or if they want to try and get some support for something. We might not always be able to give it, but we will always try if we can. So and the conversation killer strikes again.
I don't know what to say, man. Like you said it all.
Yeah, I think that's
It
a
gave
really
us food
sort
for
of,
thought. Yeah.
a good step forward from the community.
Yeah.
Or the community team at WildStar is something that you don't really see much.
I mean,
in other
one
games.
thing that might be useful for supporting events, where possible, is to actually have a GM shout out on the actual server.
So the way
That could be cool.
Yeah, so the only people that can do that are the CS team and Cougars team, basically. So we basically just have to put a request into those guys. So it's much easier for our chaps in the NA community team to do. It's a bit more tricky for us if we were doing something during EU time, just because of the hours that we are and the time difference and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely something we should try and do a lot more of, I agree. And again, that kind of goes back to the, if we do find out about something and we're promoting it, we can easily just put that request in. We can just say, oh, hey, CRB Smiley, can you just, can you put a server-wide message that there's this event going on at this player's house or at this location in the world at this time, blah 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 blah. If we know about it, we can organize that. That's not a problem.
Even maybe reward players for creating events. I don't know, like.
I mean, we generally what we try and do is, even if it's something simple like, oh, hey, here, we'll send you a t-shirt, or, something that we can do. It's, we try and find something, but I'd like to try and find a way of doing more, not necessarily exclusive in-game things, but just something. I'd like to try and do something more.
Codes.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, everybody wants Gamescom codes. They were kind of an exclusive thing. I think that as time goes on, we'll be allowed to give more of those out, but that's not my call. That's it's very much a brand and kind of that kind of marketing kind of thing.
Do I get to plug where people can go to get more of them?
If there's something going on at the minute, yeah.
I do believe we're focused on WildStar again on Convergence tomorrow night, and I do believe we're giving away some of those Gamecoms codes. Yes.
I know when PC Gamer did their weapons thing a while back, and you could get the weapons, like the Rest in Peacemaker and stuff like that. I don't know if any time went into creating the other weapons.
I want those toaster resonators.
Yeah,
but
a lot of people do, but
a lot of people that's like a prize item right now.
Yeah,
I even know the Rest in Peacemakers. But codes for that would be very, very highly
or even
prized.
like a community sort of. It goes back what we were saying to sort of like helping out or mentoring, but like a community costume or something like that incentivizes more people to try and create these community events. That'd be a really good step forward. That'd be cool.
Make it unique so that you have to participate in one of these community events to get items like that. And so, like, if I am creating my Halloween trick-or-treater trail, have that Halloween trick or trail community costume, limited community costume, as a very rare thing that you could get from my trick or treat event, right?
Mm.
So you set up like 4 or 5 different houses that are predestined, right? You get the add-on that lets you create housing tours, and you get a couple community volunteers, and then every single time players go, they get a chance to get these items from predesignated players, and then you create like an item that is very highly prized to get, and so you want to create these, you want to participate in these events that players create to get these cool looking costumes.
Yeah, it's always going to be tricky. Anything which is new or anything which requires dev time is always just tricky. Things like new costumes and stuff. With older stuff, it's a bit easier to do. Maybe something like titles, because they're so simple. Maybe that's something which is a lot more doable, and it's definitely something which we could talk to dev about. But I know that things like costume and stuff, that will be very time limited. But the simpler we can make it, so things like a title or an achievement or something is much more likely than a costume piece. But it's all good ideas. It's all stuff that we're going to talk to. So
better than nothing.
All right, folks. With that, I'm actually going to open it up to our open talk section. So, weapons free, kind of whatever you want to talk about at this point until the top of the hour, where we'll draw things to a close.
So, something I was going to throw in a little while ago in the community stroke mega server bits and pieces. I don't know what's being planned, and this suggestion was not my own, but one that came from forums. Some people were concerned about the loss of sort of personal identity when mega servers happen. One thing that was mooted was individual titles. So I would become, Mizper and have an optional title of something like of Eco, so I can still state my sort of prior affiliation. Is anything being planned in and around that regard?
Well, we're getting last names, so you actually get a completely free rename. So you could do of Eco as part and parcel of that.
Yeah, and I won't be doing that because I already have a last name, but I'm more looking at a title or a way that everyone will get that you could only have if you came from that original server.
I do not believe there are any plans. I know it was an idea we put forward as part of the mega server feedback. We were saying, people would love to get titles or something to remember their server by. I don't believe it's planned, but I'm not 100% certain on that. That's something I would need to check with Cougar and find out if there'd been any movement on that idea. But I don't believe it is planned at this time. And you can't, unfortunately, as well, just to go back on something Zap said, I don't think you could have Zap space Robo or a Zap Robo space of Echo, because unless you wanted to have of Echo as one word, because you can only have one space between the names. So you can't have like Zap Robo space of space Echo. You can't have that with the new system, sadly. Dead.
Okay. Something that I wanted to ask is, sort of extra guild functions are coming sort of in the pipeline. I know that
folks, let me just interrupt here. The town halls aren't sessions to directly quiz anyone from Carbine. They're a forum for us to discuss ideas and information among ourselves. We've kind of got a bit on track of kind of questioning poor Mark here, and I want to try and draw it a bit away from that.
Yeah. Sorry, so let me rephrase this question then. What would other sort of... I assume that you guys are guild leaders who are on here.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so what sort of guild functions would you feel necessary, like maybe a calendar for planning events or something like that? Or is that something that you feel happy to sort of put on your website? Do you feel that the sort of sign-up rate between people in the guild on the game and on your website differs, or anything like that?
Well, to take the idea from of the calendar that you proposed there, judging from the previous games I've been in, it usually is lacking in one way or another. Everyone wants something else from it. So yeah, it tends to be better to just have it on your own website that way. It's not something that needs to be supplied by the game itself. And honestly, off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything that I want the game to supply apart from a website.
Oh, I can. The biggest thing that I would like to see is an extensible API for web interactions.
Ooh, forgot about that one, yeah.
The ability, and I do believe it was talked about at one point, so hopefully it's still coming down the pipe, but the ability to turn around and push controlled data to and from a website from possibly a Lua add-on or on something else, and the ability to then sync stuff in more than one place could be absolutely huge for allowing guilds to communicate.
I think that was discussed way back when they said that the armory was, in the idea of an armory was there. I obviously can't comment on, any specifics, but that's definitely something. And expanding from that point, I really think WildStar's add-on API is good, but I think it fails to really expand on some of the things that would really help kind of hardcore raiders out, like the combat text and the way that the combat log currently works in the game. I think is severely lacking.
But
Like-
what exactly is wrong with it then?
Like the kind of information that you get from it, you can't see when bosses gain buffs. That doesn't show up in the combat log. When bosses
That
lose
part,
buffs, when your party members gain or lose buffs, doesn't show up in the combat log. I would like to see a more expansive kind of spell IDs associated with specific spells, and then that, like the kind of library that World of Warcraft has, and I know that a lot of that kind of information is data mined from the client, but we have that same functionality in kind of some of the sites that exist for WildStar that I'm completely blanking on right now, but that still have that same functionality, but that information is purely server side. And I understand that for particular balance reasons, time travel doesn't want to share, specific damage ranges or cooldowns of spells and stuff like that because it doesn't want to trivialize content. But I think that information doesn't trivialize content in WildStar. If you know the enemy that you're trying to defeat enough, it doesn't make it any less trivial, I think. So I think that kind of information could really deserve to be opened up, adding functionality to the combat text, just so we can start to see stuff like recount and the recount-esque add-ons in WildStar, so the combat logging stuff can show accurate deaths, so I can know what I died to. Because currently, right now, that kind of functionality just is not possible with how limited the combat log is in WildStar. So we will never see add-ons that will accurately tell you, from time 8 second to time 14 second in the parse, this is exactly what did damage to you, and it can't show you an accurate breakdown of that.
Well, that's
You
not entirely true.
can-
That's actually already possible,
What?
especially on wildstarlogger.com. I'm actually an add-on developer myself, so I know the problems you're talking about, and it's pretty frustrating not to have access to all of the information. Because the two main things really that are missing for an add-on developer to make a truly comprehensive combat log, is buffs and interrupts. Failed spells, I should say. Those are the two things that are actually missing. But deaths and the last bits of damage done to you, that's all there.
I think there's a secondary problem, and you'll know more than me, Jared, in terms of the amount of data you can pass, how quickly, and the methods in which you have to do so. There was a very good post put up by the author of WildStar Logs, talking about the difficulties with the methods available to transfer data. But that's probably getting a little too tricky. Suffice to say, there are people out there looking to do more with the data that's there that are hitting some limitations.
Yeah, and so yeah, I'm probably wrong about that stuff, but I know there are limitations, and limitations in terms of finding out accurate spell information based on spell ID, and then trying to backtrack that or cross-reference that to data mine databases is completely currently impossible. But like I said, they're withholding that information for balance reasons. So that's why we don't really see an accurate, let's say, boss combat add-on, a boss add-on that will tell you when stuff is happening. And I don't want to start any kind of thing where some people say that's a good thing, some people say that's a bad thing, but I think having the functionality in your game for that to exist is good. More information about your encounter is good.
So pretty much all you're asking for is tooltips of their attacks.
Yeah, please.
All right, but the timer thing, that will never be possible. But we tried making timers. It's something you can experiment with. You don't need to have the game tell you what the timer is. But the timer's all over the place. Even if you try to measure it, they're so
That's why I'm saying
random-ish.
accurate timers. They like
No,
the
but
time
they can't
cooldowns of
supply
spells
accurate
is like a
timers
priority
because...
system.
Yeah, exactly. So there can never be accurate timers, even if they supply the cooldown of the spell.
Yeah, but they can. You could deduce the priority system of
Oh, we can
how
already do that. Look at the add-on Raid Arena. That one does that.
Yeah.
But it's not helpful because you don't know if the spell is going to be cast right then, or if it's going to wait a little bit. Because even if it's not casting anything else, it sometimes waits until it casts a spell. It's not a pure priority system.
Would you say that that's problematic? Because I know WildStar's boss scripting has a tendency to break based on that priority spell system. So if the boss isn't supposed to cast a spell based on certain thresholds, I know for the longest time, like Phageboard Convergence, the boss was thought that he wasn't going to actually cast his Converge ability. Noxmine the Insidious wasn't going to cast his Converge ability when he was below 10%. And we thought that was like intended. But then Time Travel came out and said, no, this is actually a bug in his priority system, that when he's at low health, he doesn't prioritize casting his Convergence higher than his other spells, right? And because WildStar scripting, their boss scripting is purely based on priority systems for spells, it does have a tendency to break, like if your DPS is too good, or if you...
Yeah, that's a different problem entirely, indeed, but... I do kind of like the idea they went for, if they can get the bugs out of it. It can work without bugs. It's something they need to figure out and fix. It's possible. But I do like that we cannot really predict when a spell is going to happen. We can never have something like Deadly Boss mods in WildStar, at least not to the extent that it is in World of Warcraft. And I like that about it. You have to pay attention to what the boss is doing.
Yeah, Sam, I like that feature.
Yeah, I'd also have to agree on the same basis. The minute something becomes so accurate from a mod perspective that it makes gameplay decisions for a player, it becomes the de facto standard, whatever the intent.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that somebody could just be looking at a bar and know exactly what to do. I think actually watching the content and figuring it out for yourself is definitely part of WildStar's charm.
Isn't there an argument to be made that a large percentage of the difficulty in WildStar is actually player mechanical skill, placement of yourself in relation to the boss? So even if you know a boss is going to do X ability every 30 seconds, it doesn't make it any easier, because you still have to dodge out of the telegraph, you still have to keep on your rotation. So even like games like World of Warcraft, if you know a boss is going to do X, every 30 seconds, it becomes trivial to deflect it, because you aren't reliant on a telegraph system. You know the boss is going to do X in the same spot, right? But even in WildStar, there's so many random elements to the gameplay that even if you know exactly when certain boss mechanics are going to happen, it doesn't necessarily trivialize it.
No, for me the difference... do you want to go? Okay. For me the difference between those two is, if you knew when a boss was going to cast something, you can already be out of where the telegraph will be before it happens. Now you react to a telegraph, and for me that feels a lot more fun. I'm not entirely sure why, but that's just how it feels to me.
I think there's still a degree of when the boss is going to do something, obviously, because you can look at its cast bar. So take, for example, X89 Spew is about to cast it, and you can already sort of preempt it and move away, but obviously you don't exactly know that it's coming on the dot every single time.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think the major thing that combat and interactions promote here versus other games actually is this thing called situational awareness. And it's a skill that has to be learned and is one of the hardest skills to get really, really good at. Anything that detracts from people having to have the capacity to be situationally aware is, in my view, a bad thing.
And I think this is the hardest thing that casual players, or excuse the random definition of the word, is going to have to overcome in WildStar. I think there's no amount of dungeon content, no amount of training instances that will teach you situational awareness. It's one of those things that you have to learn just by playing the game a long time. And I think a lot of the hardcore players that were playing WildStar have come from other games, be it World of Warcraft or other games, Guild Wars 2, and have gained situational awareness from playing those games a very long time. And like, in my mind, the only thing that separates a hardcore player and a casual player is the amount of time that they put into the game. Like, sure, there's going to be some disparity in, let's say, acquisition of learning skills between, like, say, a smart player who is going to learn faster than a casual player. But if that casual player puts in 1,000 hours, you know, they're going to be at the same level as a hardcore player who's put in 100 hours or whatever, right? Because they've put in enough hours. They understand the mechanics and stuff like this. So I think that this kind of content that's bridging the gap between raiding and casual players where they are now, do you think they'll ever get to the point where they'll be able to raid in WildStar's current raid environment?
Yes.
If we as community and guilds encourage people to do so and provide the tools and the pathway, yes, but that's down to the people in this channel and many others. You either have the attitude of someone is casual. Let's define casual as plays, I don't know, less than 10 hours a week. Haven't got a clue what that definition is. That really doesn't matter. But we have to be able to say, hey, come in, be included, be part of our groups. We have to be able to say, well, let's invest the time. If you're going to invest time in our guild, let's invest the time in you to make you a better player for any given definition of better. Something where we go, well, you're casual, go away, or you can't already do this, we won't invite you. That's not healthy towards the long-term community of the game. One thing this game does so well, and you see it in the transition from level sort of 20 to 30, everyone runs around going, this game is easy, I kill everything, let me ruffle stomp it. And then all of a sudden you run into somewhere with more movements, more telegraphs, and you die. And you have to step back and go, well, hang on, I've actually got to learn how to play this game. And the tools are there. As you level, things incrementally get harder, so you're given the capacity to learn and to improve as the content tiers. And they've kept that up nearly all the way through in a really good sense. And I think it's for us as community and guild leaders and everyone involved in the game who wants to see it thrive to actually take the time to sort of help train, educate, and encourage, rather than just go, oh, you can't do it, I won't invite you. That's on us. And the alternative is to make all the content trivial. And that's something I'd hate to see.
I think that's possibly something that has turned quite a lot of people away from the game, the fact that people are unwilling to help others. Possible solution maybe to think, obviously, again, sorry for using the word casual, I think they're more inclined to use the looking for group system, maybe for dungeons, etc, etc. I personally, well, I think quite a lot of us probably had bad experiences with the looking for group system, but I think that maybe what we were talking about earlier with a more community sense in mind, that if you are trying to help everyone in the community, that you could possibly queue as, you know, like a mentor or something like that, get more gold, get more gain from the actual dungeon, and obviously the people in that dungeon are willing to learn, so they'd queue as maybe say as first timers instead of just queuing randomly for the dungeon and everybody gets mad at them because they haven't done it before.
Like an option that you could tick, like saying, I'm new, tick,
yeah, if
and
like
then
if,
people...
Yeah, so there's an option to click, I'm sure in the World of Warcraft LFG
they
that
added
you
that
could,
functionality.
Group lead.
Group leader. So obviously the person who's willing to help out, who's obviously higher level, higher geared, they're willing to help out would get more reward from doing the dungeon, but they would be matched up with people who maybe clicked first timer or something like that. So, you know, it's helping the community to advance their skills, so to speak.
To pick up on something Dark Angel's Wraith just said in the chat, and this is something we need as a community to stamp on, actually. He just wrote, I agree, I play enough, though it's scrolling too fast, that I'm turned off doing the harder content as I usually get the vibe that I better be good or get out. And that's something we've got to try really hard not to be guilty of, because to be honest, we're walking around shooting ourselves in the foot.
But that brings us back to what do you feel is left out between people when they get to level 50? I'm a fresh 50. I've done the 1 to 50 leveling experience. You know, I'm guided through. I understand the telegraph system. What's left out for me? Surely the 1 to 50 experience should be about teaching a player how to play the game. And once they get to 50, they should be about improving their already learned skills. Right? It shouldn't be about, okay, I'm 50. Now how do I play this game? Right?
That's a
I think
valid point.
I think it does teach you stuff as you go through. I would almost like to see, ironic this, I would actually like to see some harder content at 49 and 50 that's in solo and in small groups to make sure that you've got those skills down at the relevant level.
I think possibly jumping on that comment, maybe adding some more difficulty to the Drusera instances, or maybe adding some sort of way to, I don't know, some sort of like solo dungeons or solo experiences. Oh well, I guess ship hands are kind of like that.
I guess Drusera instances wouldn't be the right place to put it because they're focused on giving accessibility to story, and we wouldn't ever want to cut someone off from story. But I mean, Rinelli is saying a similar thing, and I see it a lot in chat and from comments from other places. People do feel they have to already be at the standard, and they aren't really sure where is the place to go to learn and to improve.
Just to go back to a point, I do believe somewhere we have said that we are discussing and looking at veteran ship hands. That is something that is being discussed and looked into. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if the decision's been made on that, but it is definitely on the cards, so to say.
I think more content for solo just kind of perpetuates the problem. Like if I can do all of the content up to dungeons just solo, then I'm suddenly forced to match. It doesn't necessarily solve me of this, maybe insecurity I have about my own play, my own ability to play the game, or fear I have that I'm going to be ostracized by the players that I'm ultimately grouped with and looking for group. And so I really like the suggestion about, having there be an alternate looking for group queue that is there for people to learn. But at the same time, I feel like it's almost very unlikely to see happen because players are always going to choose which looking for group queue is the fastest. And I can see that this looking for group queue for new players is going to be, people don't want to admit that they need to learn, right? And so they don't want to click that.
That's definitely
I need
true.
to learn, right? So there's almost this kind of this bridge. And so maybe I know games like Eve get around that by placing all players in a guild from the start of the game, or they're in kind of like a pseudo guild, they're in like a company or a school, and then players in that guild. I know there's the advice channel for that, but the advice channel being like a global kind of channel obviously boils down to kind of random discussions. It kind of turns into Baron's chat. But maybe that's a thing. Maybe if you're not in a guild, but when you get to max level, you can have an option to join like a new players guild. Like there'll be the guilds that maybe have like a Carbine GM as a GM of the guild, the guild master, and so they're persistent. But players can maybe whisper someone and get invite to that guild, and then they have a whole community that's there for them, for new players. And new players will be able to meet other new players who maybe don't really want to apply to a hardcore guild or a guild that's going to actually to apply to it, or they don't want to make that leap because they feel their skills aren't there yet. But it would still match players with, or still put them in an environment where they get to meet other new players and learn.
One thing that could help, because there's all sorts of guilds and circles and things out there, and obviously people need to find out about them, but there needs to be a rationale for someone to do small group content that's meaningful to them. So if I were a player that mostly played solo up until level 50, and then I sort of cast my eye at dungeons and raiding and attunement, and it's scary, where is my interim step? So let's say a number of things that are 3-man, or let's say 3-man. at a difficulty level that require a good interaction, but placed in the world in such a way that A, it can't be trivialized by having 20 people hit it. So yeah, maybe they do need to be instanced. And B, actually give a tangible reward, gear that is applicable for now going into adventures and dungeons, for example. Even if it's not a huge upgrade, maybe it's get 5 bits of it, get this set, get this buff, but it's something that gives people a reason to do so, that'll make them go through that content.
That sounds like veteran ship hands, to be honest. If they just make it so that you can't solo them, which kind of makes sense.
Could well be.
Yeah.
I don't know where veteran ship hands are going to be pitched, but I think the key part of that point is they need to deliver a reward that people feel is worthwhile, that's applicable for dungeon progression. So not just, oh, I didn't bother with those, oh, I need to do those because I need my 5-piece dungeon set. Do we remember the original Warcraft dungeon sets back in the day?
0.5
Yeah.
All right, folks.
Then you
I'm
could
gonna-
upgrade
I'm
them
going to
from
step in
Avenger.
here. We are out of time, unfortunately. I'll go to Mark for any closing statement or remarks he wants to make, and then we're going to close down this quarterly session.
I mean, you guys have given me loads of stuff I've written up. God knows how many pages on a Google Doc here of notes ready to take into the office with me tomorrow, which I'll send over to Carpine. Thank you all so much for not only the guys that have been speaking on the TeamSpeak server, but all of you in chat. I've been kind of making notes for your comments from there, as well as to what the guys have been saying, and just kind of taking notes of some of the kind of common themes that I was seeing. Yeah, thank you all so much for your time and for supporting WildStar and taking the time to kind of give me your feedback and let us know what you think of what's going on. There's definitely going to be some big stuff happening. There's definitely more things like the State of the Game post plan from Donatelli, and hopefully we can get some of the things which you've brought up tonight. We can get that included in there as well. And yeah, just a general overall thank you very much.
All right, folks. Thank you all for turning out. This has been the October WildStar Town Hall, the EU session. I'm hoping to kind of run these every quarter. So, what, we're in October now, so we'll be looking at maybe January after the probably after each drop. Since the drops are now going to come quarterly, I'm going to attempt to organise these on a same quarterly sort of basis, giving a week or two for the drop to settle in before we do the next one. Thank you to everyone for Twitch for turning out, and we'll all be dropping